So I went through the first breakup of my life early this year, and it was with a good friend. From the beginning, Carbs and I were very different people. She was active and sociable, and a super achiever, while I was more bookish and quiet. Um, but I think one thing that we found we had in common was this desire to like change the world on a grand scale and find a solution to some problem that no one else had figured out. So we decided to found a company together. In the Philippines, as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, if you said that you were part of a startup, no one really knew what that meant. And for us, we had no experience running a company. We had no finance or business background. In fact, we were engineers. So what we needed to do was become cheerleaders for each other and yes, women. Yes, let's start a company with zero capital and zero experience. And yes, let's give unsecured loans to college students so that they can finish studying and go on to greater things in life. At first, it was pretty daunting for the first couple of years, but eventually we started seeing changes in everyone else because suddenly other people were saying yes to us. We went from a team of 2 people to a team of 10, and it felt like doors were starting to open, like things were starting to pay off. It was exciting. I remember we were in a restaurant once with floor to ceiling glass windows and just kind of talking about our experiences. And suddenly we were in the middle of the restaurant crying to each other from an overwhelming sense of relief that we made it. We got something off the ground. But on the flip side of that relief was this dread creeping up from the mounting pressure because suddenly we weren't just 2 people with the crazy idea that we wanted to try out. We were people who had salaries to pay. And more importantly, we had student borrowers that we committed to help. Carbs, being the machine that she is, was throwing herself 100%, 1000% into it. She was working nonstop, learning nonstop. I was telling her, girl, you got to take a break because your body's breaking down literally and telling you to rest. On the other hand, I wasn't doing as well with the new responsibilities. I had been moving around from role to role, but hadn't really found my niche. And so over time, it felt like I just didn't know what I was doing anymore. I hated to go to the end of each day seeing all the unread emails. I was just entering a cycle of negativity. And eventually, um, it was starting to affect my work as well. So it came to a head in early this year when we found that a computation I had made was erroneous and that it could have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars if we hadn't caught it in time. And I think that in that moment, we kind of let out everything that we had been, keeping to each other. Because one thing that we always promised was that we would maintain a professional relationship and a personal relationship. And it was getting harder and harder for me because disappointing my boss was disappointing my friend. So when that error happened, we basically started fighting. I would say things like, I just don't know how to work with you. Your pace is too fast. And it sometimes feels like I'm trying to work with a slave driver. And for her, she would say things like, you're supposed to be smarter than this. You're supposed to have my back and you don't. And ultimately, she said, we need time to cool off. My blood literally boils when I see you. And I just can't talk or work with you in the same room. At that time, I was newly moved into a new city, all by myself in a bare apartment to be closer to work. And we had entered another lockdown because of increasing COVID cases. So I was feeling extremely isolated and lonely because the one person I would talk to about all of this was the one person I couldn't talk to. And I couldn't really talk to anyone else from a sense of pride. Looking back, that isolation was good for me because it gave me the space that I needed to really think about what I wanted and where I wanted to go from here. So we finally met 2 or 3 months later after we had cooled down. And we had a talk. And it was extremely nerve wracking for me just to even talk to her, be in the same room, because confrontation is just not my style. But in that talk, after finishing up a box of tissues in the first 10 minutes from crying, I was able to finally let her know what 3 things were important to me, which is one, that the company was able to keep helping the people that we wanted to help, and 2, that I did right by us and our relationship, and 3, that I did right by myself. And she completely agreed with me. And the only question left was, where do we go from here? Flash forward to today. She's still CEO of the company, running the day-to-day business and all its craziness. And I sit in once a month on board meetings. And I get to hear all the stories about the great trials and tribulations, and also the great successes they're having. She's even joked to me once or twice, Mel, you're so lucky to have gotten out when you did, because it is crazy here. And I think I am really lucky, because I think that was an experience I never would have gotten anywhere else. And most of all, I made a good friend that I would never have made if it weren't for this journey that we went on together. People have asked me would I be willing to do that again, and my answer is most emphatically yes, but not right now. Maybe 5 years from now. I think